Stefan were talking about creativity. And when they were talking about creativity, they talked about bringing in different perspectives and things you can learn about being creative. And there couldn't be a better way to start today than our first guest speaker. And Isabelle Schnellbuegel, who's going to be speaking today, she's currently working at Ogilvy, but what's really unique about her is she brings in a global perspective and global experiences. She's worked with Google, Dropbox, just to name a few. But that's actually not what makes her, that gives her the credibility to be talking to us about creativity. It's something that's been ingrained in her since she was a child. Since she was a child, she's thought about, well, why not me? Just because I'm a girl doesn't mean I can do it. All the boys were skateboarding, and she's like, I can do that too. And she's continued to challenge the thinking around, why can't I or why can't we? And Isabelle's colleagues would refer to her as a Swiss Army knife because she brings in so many different perspectives and so many different ways of thinking. And she's going to share that with us today around how do we change the future of creativity, and specifically, are old white men the ones who are going to be able to change that? So please welcome to the stage, Isabelle Schnellbuegel.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Graz. Hi, 15 Seconds Festival. It's amazing to be here. It's actually my first time around. I heard so many great things about this festival. I'm really looking forward to spending the next 2 days with all of you. And I'm really glad that my talk is this early in the day, so I can do it without the nervousness of having to go up on stage. I want to kick it off with a picture that some of you might have seen. It was taken at the at the Munich Security Conference in February this year. And it shows a side event of the festival, which is a CEO lunch. And it brought together some of the CEOs of the most important companies in Germany and internationally. And those are people that wield a lot of power. They have a lot of influence. Their work has a lot of impact on many people's lives. And if you look at the picture, you might notice something. At least I hope you do. They all look the same. They're all old white men. And that basically sparked the title of my talk today. Are old white men the right decision makers to drive innovation and creativity? And I love this picture. It really shows something that I think is very true about the world today, and we've heard it already in the intro and in the welcome. The world is changing a lot. Things are super complex, super complicated. We've just been through 2.5 years of pandemic that has fundamentally changed the way we work, the way we communicate, the way we interact, and also the way we do business. It has had a huge impact on the talent landscape. People do not necessarily want to move for jobs anymore. They want to be much more flexible in the way they work, which is something that businesses have to take into account. Then there are all the new innovations in terms of technology. We're just beginning to understand the metaverse and its implications. We know that companies like Apple are looking into augmented reality glasses. And our CTO recently told me something that was quite eye-opening. He said, well, you remember the first time that you held an iPhone in your hand? You didn't really understand what was possible there. And it's the same with augmented reality. We're just at the beginning of this. There's automation that will have a huge impact on jobs, on companies, machine learning, AI, you name it. So many things that are happening. And businesses have different options of reacting to that. They could do something like this. You know, we're awesome. Our product is awesome. We know our customers. Everything's great. We'll just wait till all of this blows over, just sitting there looking awesome, waiting for the problems to solve themselves. And we have seen companies do that in the past, and some of them are not there anymore. Or they might be much smaller than they once were. So it's not an option. That means we need to fundamentally rethink business. And by rethinking business, I'm not referring just to think about your business model or the way you do sales or the way you work with your employees or deploying MS Teams to work together. It's really about rethinking fundamentally how we operate as companies, how we think about our consumers, how we think about designing solutions for the future that makes us future ready and that makes us successful. And there is one key skill that really is at the core of rethinking business, and that's creativity. Creativity is the #1 skill that businesses need in order to be successful in today's world and in tomorrow's world. And I think it's always very useful to start with a definition of what creativity is. I know I'm not going to tell you anything new. We're at a festival about creativity and innovation, but still, it's good to have a common ground on this. So this is one that I like. There are some others certainly around there, but I think it's a good one. Creativity is the ability to think about a task or problem in a new or different way, or to use imagination to generate new ideas. So essentially, creativity really is about new perspectives. It's about changing perspectives. It's about thinking about a problem from a different angle, from a different viewpoint, or even combining different viewpoints. And the thing about creativity is also that you might not know that the outcome is right. There might be some unclarity of where this is all going, because creative solutions are not proven solutions. So it is also about changing perspective on outcomes there. And then there are a couple of other things that creativity needs in order to happen, and that's uninterrupted thinking time. We all know, specifically in the last couple of years, within the pandemic, we've seen our calendars getting fuller and fuller, and this is basically a killer of creativity. And in the past, when I used to run design thinking workshops, I always started the workshop with the question, where do you guys have your best ideas? And a lot of times, people would say, when I take a walk. There was always someone saying, in the shower. Interesting one. But it's really about having time to think, having time to look at things from different perspectives. And that's not an easy one in today's world. It's also about the absence of stress. Also not something that we've seen in the last 2 years. There was a lot of stress. So companies need to think about solutions for that. And also, it's about a culture of intelligent failure. And that is a very difficult one for a lot of organizations. We all know it. We're driven by shareholder value. We're driven by quarterly results, by performance reviews, by KPIs. So oftentimes, there's not much room for failure, even though it's really important to let creativity thrive. But then there's one more thing that is super important for creativity, and that I feel is not talked about enough, and that's diversity. And there are tons of studies that will tell you that diversity is an amazing enabler of company success. And that's just one stat I pulled out, and it's about gender diversity. And of course, diversity is so much more than just gender. It's about sexual orientation, it's about ethnical backgrounds, about socioeconomic backgrounds, but it's also about deep diversity, so different values, different mindsets, different ways of thinking. So coming back to the stat, 27% increased likelihood of superior value creation found in companies with high gender diversity. But it's not only about economic success, it's also about the culture. And that is really something that is important here. 85% of people believe that diverse and inclusive workforce is crucial to encourage different perspectives and ideas that drive innovation. So diversity really is a driver of creativity, and we've seen that creativity is essential in order to address the challenges that we see in today's and tomorrow's world. So we've talked a little bit about diversity in the workforce, but it's not only about the workforce, it's also about leadership. And a lot of companies are actually not that bad when it comes to diversity in the workforce. But then if you look at leadership, it's a different thing. And we've seen that in the picture in the beginning, right? If you look at all the CEOs from all those important companies in Germany, old white men. Leadership is incredibly important to shape the success of a company, but also to shape the culture. And we can see that diversity has a huge impact there as well. If we look at executive teams that are gender diverse, we see that they're 25% more likely to have above average company profitability. And when we look at ones that are ethnically diverse, it's even 36%. So there is a huge argument for diversity in executive teams from an economical and business perspective. But then I talked about diversity also as an important driver for culture. And what we can see is that, for example, women in leadership roles are setting new standards of leading people. They provide more emotional support. They help taking actions, managing or preventing burnout, something that is also incredibly important or has become much more important over the last 2 years, where we've seen a rise in burnouts through the pandemic. And they help navigate work-life challenges in a different way. So diversity in the workforce and in leadership fosters an environment of creativity, which is, again, very important to drive business success. Sounds amazing, right? Very convincing talk, great numbers. But why are things not changing? Or why are they changing at such a slow pace? And it's really fair to say that. And there are different aspects, of course, that you can look at in order to find an answer for that. And what I want to do is apply a lens of behavioral science on this. Behavioral science is basically the field of looking at human behavior, human actions, applying different fields like psychology, anthropology, political sciences, and also behavioral parts of biology, etc. And the truth is a little bit, well, interesting, right? We are hardwired to resist change. As human beings, we don't want things to change. It's just super comfortable to be in a position where you know how things are going, you know how they are, and you don't really have to get out of your comfort zone to live your everyday life. And in order to kind of look at that a little bit more, I want to pull out 2 biases that help us understand it in a bit more detail. The first one is the status quo bias. People prefer things to stay the same by doing nothing or sticking with a decision they made previously. And that goes back to the meme in the beginning, right? It's about just, letting things blow over, waiting for problems to solve themselves. It's just the easier path. And the other is the affinity bias. People subconsciously gravitate towards people who they feel share our interests, beliefs, and backgrounds. It's just easier to hang out with people that speak the same language, that you relate to very easily. There is less friction, but then again, friction is really good for creativity. And there's quite a famous study that was done in the US looking at resumes that were completely identical except for the names. And the researchers were looking at how companies would react to them. And there was a huge bias towards white men, or at least names that sounded like white men. And that kind of goes back to the affinity bias. You want to get people in that are similar to what you already have. But it gets even more depressing, right? We're hardwired to resist change, but even if we want to act differently, it is really hard. And there is, again, a framework in behavioral science that explains why that is the case, or that is the case, and that's the attention behavior gap. And it's really easy to understand if we look at, for example, environmental issues. We all know that we should change our behaviors in order to be more eco-conscious, more sustainable, change the way we shop, we eat, we travel. But then the action is missing. And it's the same with those issues. And in this case, just pulling out some figures regarding sexism, 80% of all men say they want to prevent sexism, but then only 31% are confident enough to do so. So there is this huge gap between saying or rationally saying something and then the action that is missing. So to end the talk here would be a little bit depressing. So I want to give a little outlook on what we can do in order to change things. And we can look at behavioral design in order to do that. And there are just 3 little things that I want to leave you with. First of all, it's about detecting the biases that we have, that our companies have, that our businesses have, and creating transparency and awareness around that. Why are we doing things the way we're doing them? Are there biases that lead our behavior? Then it's about debiasing the processes. And there are companies that are already looking into that, specifically around recruiting, to figure out how they can become more inclusive and fairer in their recruiting processes. But there are so many more things that we can look at, right? It's about the way we put together teams. It's about the way we reward and recognize people. It's the way we do promotions. And it's the way we solve problems, right? And it is very important to look at those processes and think about how can we really debias them. What is the design that we can apply to them that help us take out those biases? And then it's also about embracing existing diversity. I've talked about that earlier. A lot of companies are actually not that bad. There are pockets of diversity that are great. So let's pull them out, let's make them visible, and let's celebrate what we have. Because in the end, it is a process. It won't happen from one day to the other, especially when we apply the behavioral science lens. It is something that is really baked into us as human beings. So we need to look at it as a process. To close, I want to have a look again at this picture from the beginning. And as you might imagine, a lot of debate was sparked when this picture was first released. And the good thing is that 2 steps of the process that I just outlined were already taken. So the bias has been made aware. People are aware of the situation. There was lots of debate, as I said, in media and social media. And then there were reactions also from some of the participants and organizers that were at least promising to look at the process and make it different next year. Third point, embracing existing diversity and celebrating it. We'll see where we end with that, but at least there is awareness around that topic now. So, closing with the question, are old white men the right decision makers to drive innovation and creativity? I would argue they can be, if they have the right mindset, and if they are bold enough to look at their own biases, to look at the biases within their companies, and really address them fundamentally, debiasing the processes they have in the company, and really fostering an environment for creativity, innovation, and diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabelle.
Yes.
Okay, so we had challenged you to think of some questions because we want you to get curious. And we do have some amazing individuals in the audience in red shirts that have microphones. So if you do have a question, please put up your hand and they will bring over a microphone to you. But I always have lots of questions.
Awesome.
So you talked a lot about just rethinking the way that we need to think about diversity. But what can organizations do, or the people in this room today, what is one thing that they can do as they leave today?
So I think it depends a little bit on their, where they are in the organization. I think from a grassroots perspective, it is great to form groups that really stand for specific issues. For example, at Dropbox, we created the Dropbox Empowerment Network, where we brought together like-minded people to discuss what we can do, what initiatives we can drive, and what we can also take into leadership to really drive change within the company. And then as a leader, it is, of course, super important to do exactly what I discussed earlier. Look at the processes that you have in place. Look at the biases. There are great trainings trainings that you can do for your teams to really help them understand how they can drive diversity and how they can also control themselves a little bit.
So I just want to ask you one thing on that. You mentioned there's great trainings. Is there one specific training that you'd recommend to people?
So the Albright Association in Germany has a great training around female leadership and debiasing processes as well. So that's one I would recommend, but there are certainly many others if you just Google it.
Okay. Just going to quickly look to the audience to see if we've got any hands up. Any hands up for some questions?
Yes, we do have a question here.
Perfect. Thank you. Where are we looking?
Hi there. Other side. There we are. Hi, it's Rudy of the Social Business Hub Styria. I would have a question about age and diversity, because it's old people, especially old men. What is the role of age? Because one of the main points to have older people is their experience. A lot of experience, ups and downs, whatever. And that's the reason to say, yeah, well, younger people don't have that. That's why they are not ready for leadership. What is the role in this diversity?
I think a super important question, and I realize I missed age as one of the aspects of diversity. It is, in my opinion, super important to have a mixture. Of course, you know, old white men are at the moment are prevalent, and there, as you said, there is a lot to argue for. Experience of understanding of situations and really navigating them. But I think it is also important to bring in a young perspective. As I talked about in the beginning, right, the way employees are looking to work today, the things that they want from companies are changing a lot. And it's important to also bring in younger perspectives to help make that work, also on a leadership level. And it goes basically in all ways. So I think age is also a very important aspect of diversity. Totally agree there.
Great, thank you. I thought I saw a question over here. No? Okay. Yes, we've got another question over here. And in the meantime, while they're walking to give the microphone, what do you do to bring in diversity into your thinking and your creativity?
So there are a couple of things that we're doing as an organization. We have it ingrained in our values. We really want to be inclusive. For us as a creative company, it's also about every idea should be heard, no matter where it comes from, if it's like from the intern or the manager. All have the same value. We're doing a lot to put together diverse teams to really make sure that we have representation of different groups within teams when we work together, because we really believe in bringing together different perspectives to make things work. And then there are lots of initiatives that we've done as a company, signing the Charter of Diversity in Germany, working with different organizations around female leadership, female empowerment, fighting sexism in the industry, and so on and so forth.
And what about you, Isabelle? What do you do to bring in new thinking around diversity and creativity?
So there's a lot of just, you know, reading, absorbing, talking to others, bringing in new ideas. I try to check myself for biases a lot, because like every other human being, I have them. So it is important to have that self-awareness and also the transparency and just be open about it and say, well, you know, and accept mistakes as well, if someone brings that up.
It's beautiful. I know personally, I had this moment where I recognized that all I am is biases.
Yes.
Like everything I am is based off of my own experience, so I constantly need to challenge myself and bring in a different point of view, because I have this bias for positivity as an example.
Yeah.
So how do I bring in a different perspective?
Yeah.
But I think we've got a question over there.
Great.
Yes, so I really liked what you talked about, the behavioral design, and this process of detecting bias, debiasing the process, and embracing existing diversity. My question is, how much of this is already happening? How many leaders do you know that follow this process? Because, like, in theory, it sounds amazing and very hands-on also, but how much of this is happening in reality already?
I would say not enough, by far. There are certainly a couple of companies that are doing it, and that are doing it quite structurally. I personally know a couple of people that are very passionate about it and that are bringing it into their organizations. But I think, and I can mostly talk for Germany and my industry, I don't see enough of this. So I think it is super important to start the dialogue. And as I mentioned before, also as an employee in the organization, just bring it up to your leadership and talk about different options and things that you can take, different things that you see that you don't agree with, and help them make the change happen.
I think we've got time for one more question. We've got a hand up there,
There's
lady
one.
in the beautiful pink.
Hi. Whoa. Well, that was super close. My name is Clara from Omicron Electronics. And my question is, we are in a very male-dominated industry. And how would you deal with diversity if you do not actually get the workforce? Or how can you maybe empower more females to apply for jobs? How can you do that as an employer?
I totally get the point. It is, some industries just have these issues at the moment, and we do have it too in some parts of our organization. There are, of course, things that you can do as a company in terms of outreach, in terms of starting talking to young people about the field that you're in, about outreach in universities. But then also, I think it is important to take into account the situation that you're in as a company. And I talked a little bit about it being a process. It's not something that we can solve from one day to the other. You can't just fire all the men and be like, okay, now we're going to replace you with women, right? That's not the right way to do it. So I think it is very important to look at the specific diversity within the company, because as we heard before, age is an important aspect. It's also about socioeconomic background, mindsets, etc. So I think it is important to really look at what is the type of diversity that you can foster now, that you can empower now, and then think about how can you bring in different people into the organization in the longer term.
Great. Thank you so much, Isabelle, for being with us today and for the really interesting talk.